Also in Teotihuacan, we find the Pyramid of the Moon. Now, one of the most obvious things I've ever read in a textbook is that the shape of the Pyramid of the Moon is thought to mimic mountains. Shocking. That's pretty much the shape that every pyramid takes on because it's a big mound, just like a mountain. But it actually serves a function. And there's a reason why we see these built in Mesoamerica. In the ancient Near East, we find structures called ziggurats. And these are particularly common. They basically exist to raise the cella, so this element that we find at the top. And this structure exists, the cella exists, so that there's an enclosure in which the priest can speak to the god. We would have seen pretty much the same thing here, which leads you to wonder, well, why are they building this giant mound just to put a small cella at the top? And the reason that they're building this massive mound is to become closer, or to be closer to the gods. Of course, gods, generally speaking, live in the sky or in an elevated position in some societies in mountains or elsewhere. Secondly, it also raises the ritual up above the crowd so that you could see what was going on. We also see different levels. In the case of the Pyramid of the Moon, this probably reflects different groups or different levels of priesthood who could access different levels of the temple, very similar to the Ziggurat of Ur, which we find from the Neo-Sumerians. So an interesting idea, but one that we see carried over. The Mesoamerican pyramid is a lot closer to the ziggurat than it is to the Egyptian pyramids. It's a lot closer to Hindu temples building representations of Mount Meru than it is to Egyptian pyramids. So be careful when you make those comparisons. And keep in mind the role of the pyramid and what it's there to do. Now, the Pyramid of the Moon is much larger than any other Mesoamerican site. We see multiple levels, once again, of rubble filled and faced. And it takes on that step pyramid form, using both sloped and vertical rubble layers. We also find children buried at each corner on each tier, and this is probably an act of sanctification more than anything else. Here you're looking at a representation, a model, a reconstruction of the Pyramid of the Moon. Of course, some of the details are always a little bit questionable when you're doing reconstruction, but here we have that idea of the cella at the top. This would have been a sacred structure that only the priesthood could enter. We have a pair of smaller cellas, possibly minor altars, minor gods, or any number of other possibilities. And then a large platform at the front, which could have served ritualistic purposes, pulling the ritual or the sacrifice or whatever was going on forward so that the crowd beneath could have seen it. Remember, people, your average citizen of Teotihuacan, would not have access to the Pyramid of the Moon any more than they would have access to any other temple. Generally, the temple is a holy place that doesn't allow the profane entry.